Early in 1777, the colonials had furthered the cause substantially in a series of small engagements. A decisive rout of several hundred loyalists at Monmouth Courthouse early in 1777 and the success of the Forage War campaign pinned the British in New Brunswick, Perth Amboy, and on Staten Island. Washington's army, along with at least 100 abandoned loyalist farms in the interior, denied the Crown much-needed supplies during the winter and spring of 77. This forced the British to rely mostly on supplies brought in by sea, this from the Caribbean and from Britain itself. The negative effect on morale continued to grow and forced Howe to take action. He devised a plan to trap Washington into a large-scale engagement in the hopes of crushing the rebels and bringing an end to the Patriot Rebellion. What would happen next would change history forever, establishing that this war would be tactically unlike anything else seen during this era of Western warfare. Throughout the early and mid-parts of June, Howe ventured into the heart of New Jersey in an attempt to bait Washington into a large-scale battle. This while Howe hid his intentions for a move on the capital of Philadelphia. June 14th, Howe marched on and plundered Somerset Courthouse, modern-day Millstone. Washington did not bite. Howe fell back again to Perth Amboy. Washington had Lord Stirling shadow the British force back to Perth Amboy, and Howe saw his chance to crush 2,000-strong force of Stirling and cut off any attempt by Washington to reach the fortifications of the Watchung Mountains and to obtain the engagement he had planned. Carrying a 16,000-strong force across from Staten Island proved a major effort. The lack of vessels and Howe choosing only to land in Perth Amboy, thus avoiding any opposition, would cost the Crown time and the element of surprise. Nevertheless, by 1 a.m. June 26, 1777, Howe's North American forces marched out of Perth Amboy in two columns. As his held-up German mercenaries landed, they immediately joined the march in an attempt to swiftly join the invasion. However, the logistical issue hampered Howe's maneuver. Neither column reached the intended positions until 6 a.m. Using two columns each 8,000 strong to employ a pincer maneuver and trap the colonials was still very possible, though. In fact, with British superiority in troop strength, weaponry, and discipline, there was no cause for Howe to alter his strategy. With the 1 hour instead of the 3 hour head start Howe intended, the plan went into action to establish Howe's desired positioning. One column under General Cornwallis marched for Woodbridge. This column consisted of several companies of Hessian Jaegers, 3 battalions of Hessian Grenadiers, and 1 British, mounted Hessian Chasers, and some British Dragoons from the 16th Light Dragoons, a battalion from the Brigade of Guards, and the Loyalist Provincial Unit of the Queen's Rangers. The other column under Major General Vaughan was accompanied by General Howe. It consisted of Jaeger companies from Hessel Castle and Ansbach-Bayreuth, and battalions of British Light Infantry and Grenadiers who marched toward Bonnertown. Those logistical issues transporting some Hessian troops from Staten Island slowed the march, eliminating much of the surprise, which would prove costly as the Patriots were later able to escape orderly. By 7 a.m., hostilities began at Strawberry Hill, an elevation in today's Woodbridge Township that marks its border with Perth Amboy. Americans holding the high ground were charged with delaying the advance of General Cornwallis' column for as long as possible. Washington was alerted by the sound of the battle and perhaps a half hour later received word from scouts that no less than 12,000 British were 2.5 miles away. This prompted Washington to begin the move of the American main force into their natural citadel, the Watchung Mountains. Stirling, Maxwell, and Conway would be on their own and have to devise a way of stalling a 16,000-plus British force with just under 2,000 men, long enough to preserve the American Revolution. This first action saw a new unit of British riflemen, led by the genius craftsman Captain Patrick Ferguson. The Scottish-born Ferguson was regarded as the greatest shot in the whole of the British Army. He was tactically sound as a field commander, and his men were using the first truly repeating rifles in existence, designed by him. This new elite rifle corps of the British would do battle with a 150-man contingent of Daniel Morgan's riflemen, whom were regarded as the best shots in the colonies. This elite American unit was commanded by Captain James Dark, and though amazing shots, Morgan's riflemen were heavily outgunned, facing the British counterparts equal in skill, possessing superior firearms, and directly supported with no less than 2,000 infantry. The paltry but highly skilled force of 150 Patriots dueled their mirror unit of 250 British Ferguson rifles, holding off the juggernaut for about a half an hour before a bayonet charge by the infantry forced them to abandon the ridge. Darke's men pulled back to Oak Tree Road, where Sterling sent Brigadier General Thomas Conway's brigade in support to establish a new battle line with about 700 Pennsylvania German volunteers known as Ottendorf's Corps. Frontline detachment at Oak Tree Road was commanded by New Jersey's General Maxwell and French Colonel Armand Tuffin. Ottendorf's corps was joined by Captain Dark's 150 Morgan riflemen and a few hundred New Jersey militiamen to hold the pass at Oak Tree Road. 3 breast cannon that were newly supplied by the colonial's French allies were also placed here in defense. This artillery was cutting edge at the time of the battle. Sterling knew that he could not hold this line, but would have to delay as long as possible at every point along his retreat. Washington's ability to entrench the bulk of the army in the highly defensible natural citadel of the Watchung Mountains relied on this. Moving along Oak Tree Road, the Cornwallis column encountered the near 1,000-strong Patriot line at about 8:30 a.m. Conway and Maxwell commanded the majority of American troops along the high ground at the intersection of Oak Tree Road, Plainfield Road, and New Dover Road. This second action is where Cornwallis's column encountered its first major resistance. The battling here went on for almost an hour, culminating in fierce hand-to-hand combat. The severely outnumbered Americans were forced to flee towards the ash swamp and Scotch Plains. The scrappy Continentals and militia did so orderly, managing to withdraw with the cannon and elude significant captures. However, in a display of impressive valor, Pennsylvania troops took heavy losses to secure the evacuation of the Oak Tree Road picket. 32 men out of 80 Pennsylvanians fell in order for their Patriot brothers to retreat and regroup in Scotch Plains. Sterling's retreat during the Battle of Short Hills saved the Revolution. This series of 3 engagements during the Battle of Short Hills can be considered a flashpoint when evaluating the conflict as a whole. Any faltering from the narrow margin of error would have ended the Continental Army. It is in our opinion it took actions far beyond sound tactics to secure the existence of the Continental Army. It took steadfast courage, heroic sacrifice, and a discipline that was beginning to show itself. In Part 2, we will discuss the actions of the Short Hills Tavern and at Sterling's command in the Ash Swamp. This part of the battle would see arguably the greatest hold against a flanking maneuver in the entirety of the 18th century, when 500 men held back the full might of the British for hours, saving the American Revolution.